I thought we were in the perfect relationship until I discovered her secret, and it shattered everything I believed in. For the longest time, I believed Emma and I were the ideal couple. We had been together for 4 years, and everything seemed to be falling into place. Our relationship had a natural rhythm to it, one that made me feel secure and confident about our future. We had talked about everything: getting married, buying a house, even starting a family someday. In my mind, Emma was the one. There was no question about it. We met at work, which now feels like a lifetime ago. She was the outgoing project manager, always bright and bubbly, while I was the quiet, reserved software developer. It was one of those classic opposites attract scenarios, and I think that is what drew us to each other. She pulled me out of my shell, made me laugh more than I ever had, and I admired her ability to light up any room she walked into. For the first few years, everything was easy. We rarely argued, and when we did, it was over small things that never seemed to linger. We moved in together after 2 years, and life felt settled. I remember thinking that I had it all figured out. I was lucky, I had someone who loved me as much as I loved her. Or so I thought. 6 months ago, things started to change, although I did not notice it at first. Emma became more distant, especially when it came to her phone. She used to leave it lying around the house, but now she was taking it with her everywhere, even to the bathroom. At first, I didn't think much of it. She told me work was getting stressful, and she needed to stay connected in case something urgent came up. I trusted her, because why wouldn't I? We had always been honest with each other, and I had never felt the need to question her. Then came the late nights. Emma would come home later than usual, telling me she had to stay late at the office or attend work dinners. Again, I believed her. She had always been dedicated to her job, and I had no reason to think otherwise. But as the late nights became more frequent, and as her explanations started feeling more rehearsed, I began to wonder if there was something she wasn't telling me. The turning point came one Friday night. Emma came home much later than she had said she would, and when she walked through the door, she looked different, almost guilty. She barely spoke to me, gave me a quick kiss, and went straight to bed. I tried to convince myself that it was just work stress, that I was overthinking things. But that night, as I lay awake, the doubt started creeping in. The next day, while Emma was in the shower, I did something I never thought I would do. I picked up her phone. It was sitting on the kitchen counter, screen locked, but I knew her passcode after all. We had shared everything for years. As soon as I unlocked it, I saw her messaging app light up. And that is when I saw his name, Alex. At first, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe Alex was just a colleague, someone she was talking to about work. But as I scrolled through the messages, my heart sank. They weren't just casual conversations about work. The texts were flirty, filled with emojis and jokes I had never heard before. There was an intimacy in their words that made my stomach churn. I kept reading, my hands shaking. The messages had been going on for months right under my nose. They talked about meeting up, about how much fun they had together, about things that were clearly more than just work. I felt sick. This was the woman I had loved, the woman I thought I would spend the rest of my life with, and she had been hiding this from me for months. When Emma came out of the shower, I confronted her. I asked her who Alex was, my voice barely steady. She froze, her face going pale. That was all the confirmation I needed. At first, she tried to deny it. She told me Alex was just a friend, that I was overreacting. But I had seen the messages. I knew there was more to it than she was letting on. I asked her if she had feelings for him, if she had been seeing him behind my back. She broke down in tears, admitting that things had started with Alex a few months ago. She said it had started out as just talking, but over time, she had developed feelings for him. I asked her why. Why hadn't she told me if she was unhappy? Why had she felt the need to lie to me for months? She told me she was confused, that she had never meant for it to go this far. She said she still loved me, but she didn't know how to stop what had happened with Alex. Hearing her say that tore me apart. The woman I had loved for 4 years was standing in front of me, telling me she didn't know if she loved me anymore. That she had feelings for someone else. It felt like my entire world was crumbling around me, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I couldn't stay in the apartment that night. I packed a bag and left, crashing at a friend's place. The next few days were a blur of confusion, anger, and heartbreak. Emma texted me constantly, apologizing, saying she wanted to fix things. She said she would cut off contact with Alex, that she was willing to do whatever it took to make things right. But I couldn't shake the betrayal. It wasn't just that she had feelings for someone else, it was the fact that she had lied to me, over and over again, for months. I couldn't trust her anymore, and without trust, there was no relationship left to save. We officially broke up a few weeks later. It was one of the hardest decisions I have ever made, but I knew it was the right one. I couldn't stay in a relationship where the foundation had been shattered. It has been 6 months since the breakup, and I am still trying to piece my life back together. Some days, I feel like I will never be able to trust anyone again. Other days, I remind myself that I deserve better, that I deserve someone who will be honest with me from the start. Looking back, I realize that I ignored the signs. I wanted so badly to believe that our relationship was perfect, that I overlooked the cracks that had been forming. But now, I know that sometimes the truth is too painful to see, even when it is right in front of you. In the weeks that followed the breakup, I found myself constantly replaying everything in my mind. Every conversation, every moment, every sign I had missed. I kept wondering how I could have been so blind, how I could have trusted someone who had been deceiving me for so long. It felt like my life had split into two before I knew the truth and after. I had moved out of the apartment we shared. It was too painful to stay in a place filled with memories that now felt tainted. I found a small one-bedroom apartment across town, a far cry from the home we had built together, but it was mine. It was quiet, lonely, and at times suffocating, but it was a space where I could finally start to process everything. Emma had tried to contact me several times after the breakup, sending long texts and emails, apologizing again and again. She kept saying she regretted everything, that she had made a mistake and wanted another chance. But every time I thought about responding, I remembered the messages I had read between her and Alex, the lies she had told me to my face, and the way my heart had shattered that night. There was no going back. I had also found out through mutual friends that Emma had stopped seeing Alex not long after we broke up. Apparently, things between them had fizzled out quickly once the excitement of sneaking around was gone. In a twisted way, that almost made it hurt more knowing that she had thrown away everything we had for something that wasn't even real. It made me question everything, not just about our relationship but about love in general. If someone I thought I knew so well could betray me like that, how could I ever trust someone again? Work became my escape. I threw myself into projects, working late hours to avoid going home to my empty apartment. I started going to the gym more, to anything to keep my mind off of Emma and what had happened. But no matter how busy I kept myself, the pain would always find a way to creep back in during quiet moments. I would catch myself thinking about the future we had planned, about the life we were supposed to have together, and it felt like I had lost a piece of myself. My friends tried to help, but there was only so much they could do. They told me I was better off without her, that I would find someone who would appreciate me and never take me for granted. I nodded and agreed with them because that is what I was supposed to do, but inside, I wasn't so sure. It felt like Emma had taken a part of me that I couldn't get back. Months passed, and life moved on, even if it felt like I was standing still. I had started to go out more, attending social events and meeting new people, though the thought of dating again felt impossible. I wasn't ready to open myself up to anyone, not after everything that had happened. I didn't want to risk getting hurt again. Then, one day, out of nowhere, I got a message from Emma. It was short and to the point. She said she had been thinking about me, that she had gone to therapy and worked on herself, and that she wanted to meet up to talk. She didn't beg for forgiveness or try to make excuses. She just asked if I would consider hearing her out, even if it was just for closure. For days, I stared at that message, unsure of what to do. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to leave the past in the past and move on without looking back. But another part of me, maybe the part that was still healing, was curious. I wanted to understand why she had done what she did, to hear her side of the story without all the anger and betrayal clouding my judgment. After much deliberation, I agreed to meet her. We arranged to meet at a small cafe we used to go to when things were still good between us. As I walked in, I saw her sitting at a table by the window, nervously sipping her coffee. She looked different, more subdued, like the weight of what had happened had taken a toll on her too. The conversation started awkwardly, as most do in these situations. We talked about work, life, the usual small talk that people use to avoid the real issues. But eventually, the conversation shifted to what we were both really there to talk about, us. Emma admitted that she had made a terrible mistake, that she had been confused and didn't know how to handle her feelings at the time. She said she felt trapped in our relationship, not because of me, but because of her own issues. She talked about how she had lost herself in trying to live up to the idea of a perfect relationship and how, in her confusion, she had turned to Alex as an escape. She didn't love him, she said. It was never about him. It was about her own fears and insecurities. I listened, and for the first time, I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad. I just felt tired. I told her how much her betrayal had hurt me, how much I had loved her, and how I had believed in us. I told her that I had tried to figure out what I had done wrong, but in the end, I realized it wasn't about me. It was about her, and the choices she made. We sat in silence for a while after that. There wasn't much left to say. Emma apologized again, genuinely this time, and I could see that she meant it. But even with her apology, I knew there was no going back. Too much had happened. Too much had changed. As we parted ways that day, I felt a strange sense of relief. Meeting with Emma hadn't brought me closure in the way I thought it would, but it gave me something else: acceptance. I accepted that what we had was over, that it wasn't my fault, and that sometimes, people make mistakes that change everything. I walked away from that cafe knowing that I could finally let go. Emma was a part of my past, a chapter that had closed, and now, it was time to move forward. It wasn't easy, and I knew it would take time, but for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. The future still felt uncertain, but I was no longer stuck in the past. And that, for now, was enough. As I walked away from the cafe, my mind swirled with a mix of emotions. For the first time since everything had gone down, I felt like I had finally reached a point where I could move on. Seeing Emma again had brought clarity, and with that, a strange sense of peace. Yet, as much as I wanted to close this chapter, there was a lingering feeling I could not quite shake. It was subtle, like a shadow at the edge of my thoughts, something unfinished. The days that followed were surprisingly calm. Life had settled into a steady rhythm, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I was starting to feel okay with the idea of being alone. I threw myself into work and even started hanging out with friends more, rekindling old friendships that I had let slide during my time with Emma. It felt good to be reconnecting with myself, finding joy in things that had nothing to do with the past. But that feeling, that shadow of uncertainty, kept creeping in. It started small. A few weeks after my conversation with Emma, I received a random text from an unknown number. At first, I thought it was just spam, but when I opened it, the message read, "You might want to know the whole story. There is more than what she told you." My heart skipped a beat. I stared at the message, trying to make sense of it. Who could this be, and what did they mean by the whole story? I had already heard Emma's side. What more could there be? I tried not to overthink it, but the message gnawed at me. What if there was more to the story? What if there were things Emma still hadn't told me? I was torn between letting it go and chasing down whatever this was. After all, I had just started feeling better, and the last thing I wanted was to be dragged back into the mess. But I couldn't help myself. I texted back, asking who this was and what they were talking about. For days, I received no response, and I began to convince myself that it was probably a prank or someone trying to mess with me. Just as I was about to let it go completely, another message popped up on my phone: "Meet me at the park tomorrow at 6 p.m. You deserve to know." The cryptic nature of the message unsettled me, but curiosity got the best of me. My mind raced with possibilities. Who could this be? Was it Alex? Was there someone else involved? I had so many questions, but I knew that showing up would be the only way to get answers. The next evening, I found myself walking through the park at exactly 6 p.m. The sky was beginning to dim, casting long shadows across the grass. I was on edge, scanning the faces of people passing by, wondering who I was supposed to meet. I checked my phone again, but there were no new messages, no clues. Minutes passed, and I was starting to think that this had been a mistake, just someone trying to waste my time. But as I was about to leave, I noticed a figure sitting on a bench near the fountain, their face obscured by a hoodie pulled low over their eyes. Something about the way they were sitting, the tension in their posture, told me this was who I had come to meet. Hesitantly, I walked over, my heart pounding in my chest. "Are you the one who texted me?" I asked, standing a few feet away. The figure slowly looked up, and I froze. It was Emma. She looked nothing like the confident woman I had seen at the cafe weeks earlier. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her face pale, and she seemed scared. "Emma, what is going on? Why are you texting me like this?" I asked, confusion and frustration bubbling up inside me. She hesitated, her hands fidgeting in her lap. "I didn't know who else to turn to," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought I could handle it on my own, but I was wrong. I made a mistake, and it's worse than I told you." My heart sank. "What do you mean? What could possibly be worse than what you already did?" She looked around nervously, as if she was afraid someone was watching. "It's Alex," she said, her voice shaking. "There is something I never told you about him." I felt a wave of anger rise up in me. "I thought you said it was over with him. Why are we still talking about Alex?" "It is over," she said quickly, "but it is not just him, Jake. He wasn't he who I thought he was. Her eyes darted around again, and I realized she was terrified. I think he has been following me. Watching me. And I am scared. I stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. What do you mean, watching you? You're not making any sense. Emma swallowed hard, her voice trembling. There are things I found out after we broke up, things about his past. I should have never gotten involved with him, but I did, and now I don't know how to get out of it. He has been sending me messages, leaving things at my apartment. And I think he knows that I met with you. Chills ran down my spine. Are you saying he is stalking you? Why didn't you go to the police? I can't, she whispered. He has something on me, Jake. Something I can't let get out. If I go to the police, he'll ruin me. I need your help. I don't know what else to do. I stood there, torn between disbelief and concern. This was not what I had expected when I showed up at the park. Emma was clearly terrified, but I could not tell if this was just another one of her lies, or if she was genuinely in danger. Part of me wanted to walk away, to tell her this was no longer my problem. But another part of me, the part that had once loved her, felt an overwhelming need to protect her. What do you want me to do? I asked, my voice low. Emma looked up at me, her eyes filled with desperation. I need you to meet him, she said. Convince him to leave me alone. My blood ran cold at the thought. Meet him? Are you serious? Why would I ever want to meet the guy who ruined everything? Because you're the only person I trust, she said, her voice cracking. Please, Jake. I am begging you. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to walk away, to leave Emma to deal with the mess she had created. But as I looked at her, broken and afraid, I realized that I couldn't. Despite everything, I still cared about her, and if what she was saying was true, then she was in real danger. Reluctantly, I nodded. Fine. I will meet him. But this better not be another one of your games, Emma. She let out a shaky breath of relief. Thank you. I will send you the details. As I turned to walk away, I could not shake the feeling that I was walking into something far bigger and far more dangerous than I had realized. Something told me this was not just about Emma's mistakes anymore. It was about mine too. What was I really getting myself into? The entire night after my encounter with Emma, I could not sleep. My mind raced with questions, each one more unsettling than the last. Why had Emma waited until now to tell me about Alex? What had she gotten herself into that was so serious she could not go to the police? And most of all, why had I agreed to meet him? I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself that I was doing the right thing. Emma had hurt me, yes, but no one deserved to be in danger like this. If she was truly afraid for her life, how could I turn my back on her? But as much as I wanted to believe I was doing this to help her, there was another, darker truth gnawing at me. Deep down, I was not just doing this for her, I was doing it for me, too. Some part of me still felt tied to her, still felt responsible for what had happened. Maybe I thought that by helping her now, I could finally make peace with everything. The next morning, I woke up to a message from Emma. She had sent me the location, an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. My stomach dropped as I read it. This was starting to feel more like the plot of a crime show than real life, and every instinct told me to back out. But I had already committed, and I knew if I didn't show up, I would regret it. I texted Emma back, asking her for more details, but all she responded with was, "Just talk to him. Convince him to let me go. He listens to you more than he ever will to me." That did nothing to calm my nerves. The rest of the day felt like a blur. I could not focus on anything, not work, not the calls from friends asking if I wanted to meet up, nothing. I kept checking my phone, half hoping that Emma would call me and cancel the whole thing. But she didn't. The hours dragged on, and before I knew it, it was time to head to the warehouse. I arrived just as the sun was starting to set, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement. The warehouse loomed in front of me, its windows shattered, and the walls covered in graffiti. It looked like the kind of place you would expect to find in the middle of a horror movie, and the eerie silence that surrounded it did nothing to ease my anxiety. I parked my car a little ways away, just in case things went south, and made my way toward the entrance. My heart was pounding in my chest as I stepped inside. The air was thick with dust, and the only light came from the fading sunlight streaming through the broken windows. I walked cautiously, my footsteps echoing through the empty space. "Jake." I froze. The voice came from the far end of the warehouse, deep and low, sending a chill down my spine. I turned slowly, and there he was, Alex. He was standing in the shadows, just out of the light, his figure barely visible. I could make out his silhouette, a tall, broad-shouldered man with an air of menace about him. I had seen him before, of course, but something about him felt different now, more threatening. "Alex," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Emma sent me." He stepped forward, and for the first time, I saw his face clearly. His expression was cold, calculating. There was none of the charm that Emma had once talked about, none of the charisma that had supposedly drawn her in. This man looked dangerous. Did she?" he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "And what exactly are you supposed to do, Jake? Play the hero, save her from the big bad wolf?" I clenched my fists, trying to keep my cool. "She is scared, Alex. She told me you have been following her, threatening her. I am here to ask you to leave her alone." He laughed, a cold, humorless sound that echoed through the warehouse. "Scared, of me? That's rich. Did she tell you the whole story, Jake? Did she tell you why she's so scared?" I frowned, my heart racing. "She said you have something on her, something she can't let get out." Alex took another step closer, his eyes gleaming with something dark. "Oh, I have something on her, all right. But that is not why she's scared." He paused, letting the silence hang in the air before continuing. "She is scared because she knows what she did. She knows she crossed the line, and now she can't undo it." I stared at him, trying to piece together what he was saying. "What are you talking about? What did she do?" He smiled, a slow, chilling smile. "She didn't tell you, did she? She didn't tell you that this whole thing was her idea? That she came to me, begging for help when her life with you got too boring? She wanted out, Jake. Out of your perfect little relationship. But when things got messy, she panicked. She tried to back out, and now she's desperate. She's using you to clean up her mess." My mind spun. That doesn't make sense. She said you were the one stalking her, the one threatening her. Alex shook his head, his smile never fading. "Oh, I've been keeping an eye on her, all right. But not because I want her back. I'm just waiting for her to do the right thing for once in her life. But you're just a pawn in her game, Jake. She's playing you." I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. Everything I thought I knew was crumbling around me. Was Emma lying again? Was she using me to protect herself from something even darker? Before I could say anything else, Alex took another step forward, his face inches from mine. You need to ask yourself, Jake, who are you really trying to protect here? Because if you're still thinking it's her, you're in for a rude awakening. My breath hitched as his words sank in. Suddenly, everything felt wrong. Had I walked right into a trap? Had Emma been manipulating me from the start? As I stood there, frozen, Alex leaned in closer, his voice barely above a whisper. You want to know what she's really hiding, Jake? Follow the money. With that, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the warehouse, leaving me standing there alone, my mind racing with questions. What money? What was he talking about? And more importantly, had Emma set me up? I had no idea where to go from here, but one thing was clear: nothing was as it seemed. I stood in the dark, empty warehouse for what felt like an eternity, replaying Alex's words in my head. Follow the money. It made no sense. What money was he talking about? Emma had never mentioned anything about finances, at least nothing significant. But Alex's chilling confidence, the way he had spoken as if he held all the cards, left me deeply unsettled. As I drove home that night, the shadows from the streetlights flashing over my windshield, I kept turning it over in my mind. Was Emma really using me? Was she hiding something far bigger than her affair with Alex? My gut told me there was something more going on, but I had no idea where to start. I decided I needed to confront Emma again. But this time, I was not going to let her off the hook with vague excuses or half-truths. She had to tell me everything. The next day, I called her. My voice was calm, but firm, and I could tell she was surprised to hear from me so soon. We agreed to meet at my apartment later that evening. I could sense the hesitation in her voice, like she knew I had learned something but wasn't sure how much. I spent the hours leading up to our meeting going over every interaction I had with her, every red flag I had ignored. I had been so blinded by my feelings that I missed the signs. But now, it was time to get answers. When she arrived, I could see the tension in her face. She was fidgeting with her hands, her eyes darting around the room as if she was already planning her escape. I offered her a seat on the couch, but I remained standing, leaning against the counter, watching her closely. Emma, I need the truth, I said, cutting straight to the point. No more lies, no more half-baked excuses. I spoke to Alex, and he said something that doesn't add up. What is this about money? What are you really hiding? Her eyes widened, and for a moment, I saw panic flicker across her face. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Instead, she just stared at me, her fingers twisting the edge of her shirt nervously. I had seen Emma nervous before, but this was different. This was pure fear. Jake, she finally whispered, it is not what you think. Please, just listen to me. I am listening, I said, my voice hard. But I need the truth, Emma. If there is something else going on, I need to know. She took a deep breath and looked down at her hands, her voice trembling as she began to speak. There is money involved. But it is not mine, Jake. It is Alex's. He made me a part of something, and I did not know what I was getting into. I thought it was harmless at first, just a way to make some quick cash after things between us ended. But it spiraled out of control. I narrowed my eyes, trying to make sense of what she was saying. What kind of money, Emma? What did you do? She hesitated again, as if trying to choose her words carefully. It started as a side deal. Alex, he has connections. Shady ones. And he convinced me to invest some money in a business he was running, something I thought was legit. But it wasn't. It was all a front for laundering money. My stomach turned. You got involved in money laundering? Are you serious, Emma? Tears welled up in her eyes as she shook her head. I didn't know, Jake. I swear, I didn't know at first. I thought it was just some stupid investment. But by the time I realized what was going on, it was too late. I was in too deep. I could barely process what she was saying. This was so far beyond anything I had imagined. So, what does Alex want from you now? Why is he still involved? She wiped at her eyes, her voice barely above a whisper. He wants me to keep quiet. He thinks if I stay silent, everything will blow over. But I know too much, and now he is trying to intimidate me, keep me scared, so I want to talk. I ran a hand through my hair, trying to wrap my head around everything. And you brought me into this. You didn't think to tell me any of this before. Emma looked up at me, her expression pleading. I didn't want to drag you into it, Jake. I thought if I kept you out of it, you'd be safe. But now, I don't know what to do. I stood there, staring at her, feeling a mix of anger and betrayal. I had come here thinking I would get answers about her infidelity, but this was so much worse. She had not just broken my heart, she had lied to me, manipulated me, and now I was tangled up in something dangerous. I can't believe this, I muttered, pacing the room. You should have told me. From the beginning. I know, she whispered. But I was scared, Jake. I didn't know what to do. Silence hung between us for a long moment. I could feel the weight of her words sinking in, but something still did not sit right with me. Alex's warning echoed in my mind, follow the money. Emma, I said slowly, is there more? Is there something you're still not telling me? She bit her lip, her eyes avoiding mine. And in that moment, I knew there was more. I could see it in the way she refused to look at me, the way she hesitated before answering. Emma, I pressed, my voice low. What aren't you telling me? She hesitated, her fingers shaking as she clasped them together. There is one more thing. I braced myself, dreading what was coming next. The money, she said quietly, some of it, is in your name. My heart stopped. What? She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. Alex needed a clean name to put some of the money through. He used you, Jake. He put it in your name without you knowing. I didn't want him to, but I couldn't stop him. For a moment, the world seemed to tilt on its axis. My entire body went numb as the reality of her words hit me. I had been set up. By her. By Alex. Without even knowing it, I was now a part of this mess. You let him use me, I whispered, my voice barely audible. She nodded, her face twisted in guilt and fear. I didn't want to, Jake. I swear. But I didn't know what else to do. I thought I could fix it before you found out. But now it is too late. I staggered back, feeling like the ground had been ripped out from under me. Everything was spinning out of control. Not only had Emma betrayed me in the worst way possible, but now I was tangled up in a criminal operation, my name tied to dirty money I had no idea even existed. You need to get out, I said suddenly, my voice sharp. Now. Jake, please, she started, but I cut her off. Get out. My voice was cold, my hands shaking with fury. She stood up slowly, tears streaming down her face as she made her way to the door. But before she left, she turned to me, her voice small and broken. I am sorry, Jake. For everything. And with that, she was gone. I stood there, alone in my apartment, my heart pounding in my chest. Everything I thought I knew was shattered. My trust in Emma, my faith in the relationship we had once had, it was all destroyed. But the worst part, I had no idea how deep this mess went. I had no idea how far Alex would go. And I had no idea what was coming next. As the hours ticked by, I paced my apartment, my mind reeling from the revelations. I felt a profound sense of betrayal, not only from Emma but from the realization that my life was now entangled in something criminal. I had no idea what Alex would do next, but the fear of the unknown gnawed at me. I tried to focus, to think rationally, but the weight of it all was overwhelming. I needed help, but from whom? If I went to the police, would they believe me? Would they understand that I was an unwitting victim caught in a web spun by both Alex and Emma? The thought of my name being linked to criminal activities, without any clear way to prove my innocence, was terrifying. The next morning, I received an unexpected knock at my door. My heart raced as I opened it to find a man in a dark suit. He introduced himself as a private investigator hired by a friend of mine who had seen the trouble I was in through mutual contacts. His presence brought a flicker of hope. I let him in and explained everything: Emma's betrayal, the money laundering, Alex's threats. He listened intently, his face inscrutable. When I finished, he nodded slowly. "Here is what we will do," he said. "We will start by tracing the financial transactions linked to your name. We need to clear your name and gather evidence to show that you were unknowingly involved. In parallel, we will keep an eye on Alex and find out what his next move might be." I felt a glimmer of relief, knowing that I was not alone in this. The investigator assured me that they would work quickly, and he advised me to avoid any contact with Emma and Alex until they had more information. As the days passed, I did my best to stay out of the way, focusing on my job and trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy. I received updates from the investigator periodically. They had managed to identify several transactions linked to my name but were still working on clearing my involvement. One evening, just as I was beginning to think that things might start to settle, I got a call from the investigator. The news was unsettling. They had tracked Alex down to a remote location, where he had been seen meeting with individuals linked to organized crime. The situation was escalating quickly, and they were concerned that Alex might make a move that could put me in danger. "Be cautious," the investigator warned. "We are doing everything we can, but I would advise you to stay vigilant and avoid any unnecessary risks." The fear of not knowing what might happen next was almost paralyzing. I felt like I was caught in a storm, with no clear direction on how to find safety. As I prepared for another sleepless night, hoping for some resolution, I was struck by a stark realization. The past few months had been a harsh reminder of how quickly things can unravel, how trust can be shattered, and how fragile our sense of security can be. The final twist came late one night. I received a package at my door, an envelope with no return address. Inside was a photograph of Emma, looking distraught, and a note that read, "I'm sorry for dragging you into this. I am leaving town for good. Please take care of yourself." I stared at the photograph, a mixture of relief and sorrow washing over me. Emma was gone, but the damage had been done. The investigator assured me they would continue to work on clearing my name and ensuring my safety, but the scars from this ordeal would take time to heal. As I sat alone in my apartment, I knew that my life had irrevocably changed. The trust one once had in others, and even in myself, had been tested in ways I could never have imagined. But through the darkness, there was a glimmer of hope. The truth was beginning to surface, and with it, a chance to rebuild. The story of Emma, Alex, and the tangled mess of deceit and betrayal had ended, but the journey to reclaim my life was only just beginning.